Today's story is Snow White and Rose Red. There was once a poor widow who lived in a lonely cottage. In front of that cottage was a garden wherein stood 2 rose trees, one of which bore white and the other red roses. She had 2 children who were like the 2 rose trees, and one was called Snow White and the other Rose Red. They were as good and happy, as busy and cheerful as 2 children in the world were. Only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red liked better to run about in the fields and meadows seeking flowers and catching butterflies, but Snow White sat at home with her mother and helped her with her housework or read to her when there was nothing to do. The 2 children were so fond of one another that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together, and when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red would answer, "Never, so long as we live," and their mother would add, "What one has, she must share with the other." Now they often ran about in the forest alone and gathered red berries, and the beasts did them no harm, but came close to them trustfully. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands. The roe would graze by their side. The stag leapt merrily by them, and the birds sat still upon the boughs and sang whatever they knew. No mishap overtook them. If they stayed too late in the forest and night came on, they would lay themselves down near one another upon moss and sleep till the morning came, and their mother knew this and had no distress on their account. Now once when they had spent the night in the wood and dawn had roused them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress sitting near their bed. He got up and looked quite kindly at them, but said nothing and went away into the forest. And when they looked round, they found they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice, and would certainly have fallen into it in the darkness if they had gone a few paces further. Now their mother told them it must have been the angel who watches over good children. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's little cottage so neat it was a pleasure to look inside of it. In the summer, Rose Red took care of the house, and every morning she laid a wreath of flowers by her mother's bed before she awoke, in which was a rose from each tree. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the rakin. The kettle was of copper and shone like gold, so brightly was it polished. In the evening, when snowflakes fell, Mother said, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door," and they sat around the hearth, and the mother would take out her spectacles and read aloud out of a large book, and the 2 girls listened as they sat and spun. Close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them, on a perch, sat a white dove, with its head hidden beneath its wings. Now one evening, as they were thus sitting comfortably together, someone knocked at the door as if he wished to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, open the door, it must be a traveller who's seeking shelter." Now Rose Red went and pushed back the bolt, thinking it was a poor man, but it was not. It was a bear that stretched his broad black head within the door. Rose Red screamed and sprang back. The lamb bleated, the dove fluttered, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak and said, "Do not be afraid, I will do you no harm. I am half frozen and only want to warm myself a little beside you." "Poor bear," said the mother, "lie down by the fire, but take care you do not burn your coat." And she cried, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear will do you no harm. He means well." So they came out, and by the lamb and the dove came nearer and were not afraid of him. Now the bear said, "Children, knock some snow out of my coat a little." So they brought the broom and swept the bear's hide clean, and he stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly and comfortably. It was not long before they grew quite at home and played tricks with their clumsy guest. They tugged his hair with their hands, put their feet upon his back and rolled him about, or took a hazel switch and beat him, and when he growled they laughed. But the bear took it all in good part, only when they were too rough he called out, "Leave me alone, leave me alone, Snow White, Rose Red, will you beat your lover dead?" When it was bedtime and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You can lie by the hearth, and you will be safe from the cold and bad weather." When day dawned, the 2 children let him out, and he trotted across the snow into the forest. Henceforth the bear came every evening at the same time, laid himself down by the hearth, and let the children amuse themselves with him as they liked, and they got so used to him the doors were never fastened until their black friend had arrived. Now when spring had come and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White, "I must go away and cannot come back for the summer." "Where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below and cannot work their way through. But when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it and come out to pry and steal, and what once gets into their hands and their caves does not easily say daylight again." Snow White was quite sorry for his going away, and as she unbolted the door for him and the bear was hurrying out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off. It seemed to Snow White as if she had seen gold shining through it, but she was not sure, for the bear ran away quickly and was soon out of sight behind the trees. A short time afterward, the mother sent her children to the forest to get firewood. There they found a big tree which lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk something was jumping backward and forward in the grass. But they could not make out what it was. When they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a snow-white beard, a yard long. The end of the beard was caught in the crevice of the tree, and the fellow was jumping backward and forward like a dog tied to a rope and did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fire eyes, and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me?" "What are you about, little man?" asked Rose Red.
"Stupid prying goose," said the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree to get wood for my cooking. The little bit of food one of us wants gets burnt up directly with logs. We do not swallow so much as you coarse, greedy folk. I had just driven the wedge safely, and everything was going well, but the wretched wood was too smooth and suddenly sprang asunder, and the tree closed so quickly I could not pull out my beautiful white beard, and it is tied in, and I cannot get away. And you silly, sleek, milk-faced things laugh. How odious!" The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out. It was caught too fast. "I will run and fetch someone," said Rose Red. "Senseless goose," snarled the dwarf. "Why should you fetch someone? You are already too many for me. Can you not think of something better?"
"Don't be impatient," said Snow White. "I will help." And she pulled her scissors from her pocket and cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag which lay among the roots of the tree, which was full of gold, and lifted it up, grumbling to himself.
"Uncouth people cut off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to you," he cried,
swung the bag upon his back, and went off without even once looking back. Some time after that, Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a fish. As they came near the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping beside the water as if it were going to leap in, and they ran and found it was the dwarf. "Where are you going?" said Rose Red. "Surely you don't want to go into the water."
"I am not such a fool," snapped the dwarf. "Don't you see the accursed fish wants to pull me in?"
The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had twisted his beard with the fishing line, and a big fish had bit, and the feeble creature had not strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and pulled the dwarf toward him. He held on to all the reeds and rushes, but it was of no good. He was forced to follow the movements of the fish, and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. Now the girls came just in time. They held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but in vain, for the beard and line were entangled fast together. Nothing was left to bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby a small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw, he screamed,
"Is that civil, you toadstool, to disfigure one's face? Was it not enough to clip off the end of my beard? You've cut off the best part now. I cannot let myself be seen by my people. I wish you'd been made to run the soles off your shoes."
And he took out a sack of pearls that lay in the rushes, and without saying a word, dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. Now it happened soon afterward the mother sent the two children to town to buy needles and thread, laces and ribbon. The road led them across a heath upon which huge pieces of rock lay strewn here and there. Now they noticed a large bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round above them. It sank lower, and at last settled on a rock not too far off. Directly afterward they heard a loud, piteous cry, and they ran up and saw with horror the eagle had seized their old acquaintance the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children, full of pity, at once took hold of the little man, and pulled against the eagle so long he let his booty go. As soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright, he cried with his shrill voice, "Could you not have done it more carefully? You dragged at my brown coat so it is all torn and full of holes, you helpless, clumsy creatures!" And he took up a sack full of precious stones, and slipped away again under the rock to his hole. The girls, who by this time were used to his thanklessness, went on their way and did their business in town. And as they crossed the heath again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones in a clean spot, and had not thought anyone would come so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones. They glittered and sparkled with all colours so beautifully that the children stopped and looked at them.
"Why do you stand gaping?" cried the dwarf, and his ashen grey face became copper-red with rage. He was going on with his bad words when a loud growling was heard, and a black bear came trotting toward them out of the forest. Now the dwarf sprang up in a fright, but could not get to his cave, for the bear was already close, and in the dread of his heart he cried, "Oh, Mr. Bear, spare me! I will give you my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What would you want with such a slender fellow as I? You would not feel me between your teeth. Now take these two wicked girls. They are tender morsels for you, as fat as young quail. Mercy's sake, eat them!" The bear took no heed of his words, but gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. Now the girls had begun to run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid. Wait, I will come with you." And they knew his voice and waited, and when he came up to them, suddenly his bear skin fell off, and he stood there, a handsome man, clothed all in gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and was bewitched by that wicked dwarf who had stolen my treasures. I've had to run about the forest as a savage bear till I was freed by his death. Now he has his well-deserved punishment." Snow White was married to him, and Rose Red to his brother, and they divided between them the great treasure that the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. The old mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years, and she took the 2 rose trees with her, and there they stood before her window, and every year they bore the most beautiful roses of white and red. The end.